Let me show you what I mean. Come on. To learn more about this, let's hear from a professional. All right, let's talk bikes. Bike riding is an incredibly integral part of Copenhagen's landscape. Everywhere you look in the city, you'll see a steady stream of cyclists. Men, women, children, people of all backgrounds biking alongside one another. And they all constantly move within their separate bike lanes. The traffic lights are actually synced to the average speed of the cyclists, allowing them to continually hit the green wave. Copenhagen is greatly known as the bicycle capital of the world and is lauded by urban planners as being incredibly livable and incredibly sustainable. People move efficiently through the streets, and they have been for decades, just as long as the bike has been around, to be honest. So let's backtrack a little. Danish bike culture is as old as the bike itself. Copenhageners have been using bikes to transport themselves to work since the 1800s, and back then it was the fastest, easiest, and most environmentally friendly way to go about things, and to this day it still is. Though there was a period of time where Copenhageners had actually parked their bikes and chained them up to their bike racks. This period, post-World War II, can be characterized by the skyrocketing popularity of automobiles. Cars became a symbol that depression and that the war was finally over. Families could afford to buy cars, and the city's infrastructure was changing as a result of this. The Copenhagen of that time is greatly different than the Copenhagen we know today. City planners in the 60s saw very few bikes, lots of cars, lots of gasoline, wide highways, tall skyscrapers in their future. The mood changed greatly, and a road revolution actually came into play because of a few factors. 1. Plans to change the lakes came into play. Copenhageners are incredibly proud of the natural beauty of the lakes and were extremely angry that road projects would essentially destroy them. 2. Increased traffic accidents. A growing number of people were being killed in traffic accidents due to the narrow and often congested streets. A striking number of these people killed were children under the age of 14, and these accidents greatly angered the population. It pushed them to mobilize to stop the murder of their children. 3. The oil crisis of the 70s. The oil crisis hit Denmark especially hard in the early 70s, and that, combined with the great anger and protest occurring, prompted a policy focus away from the automobile. This led to things like car-free Sundays in many neighborhoods, and then the city center itself went to being permanently car-free, so areas like Nghi and Stroget, for example. The people wanted a solution to their problems, and it quickly became clear that the answer was their two-wheeled friend, the bike. Riding has only improved the city, and the conditions to ride bikes within the city have improved. What would a Dane be without their bike? Anyways, it affords them the freedom to move and the freedom to be. Nowadays, people of all walks and bike paths of life ride bikes. It's the majority within the city and fits right in law of Jante. This unspoken law essentially dictates that no one is better than anyone else. Everyone is equal. And on the bike paths, this is true. You see well-dressed businessmen next to young mothers, next to young fathers, next to young children, next to elderly people of all walks of life. No matter who you are, and no matter what your income or situation is, cycling is always the most dependable and the cheapest means of transportation. Even the members of parliament ride their bikes to work every day. Promotion of biking is seen at the top levels. Legislators discouraged car use and made cars the less attractive form of transportation. The Danish government, in fact, implemented a range of taxes, restrictions on car ownership, parking, and use that makes driving in Copenhagen not only expensive, but ridiculously inconvenient. So legislation is one bit, but entire infrastructure changes are another. Some say that 2 to 3% of parking spaces are removed every year, making it even harder to drive in the city. Bike lanes are made clearer and oftentimes better maintained than the automobile lanes. In fact, when the snowy winter weather hits, these bike lanes are the first to be plowed and treated because the majority of the citizens ride their bikes, no matter the weather. Copenhagen keeps on getting more and more bike-friendly. The bike has remained Copenhageners' main mode of transportation for decades, and there's no indication that anything will change. In fact, if anything, the usage of bikes is increasingly encouraged. Some of the goals of the city by 2025, actually, according to the Cycling Embassy, include increasing the number of commuters who cycle to work or education to 50%, reducing cyclists' average travel time by 15%, increasing the number of cyclists who feel safe in traffic to 90%, and decreasing the number of seriously injured cyclists by 70%. So as you can see, it's a huge focus on making cycling not only safe but more efficient, to increase the number of people who are participating and to increase their bike footprint. The city continues to build green routes to ensure safe and clean transport routes for cyclists while creating green spots in the cityscape. There are further plans to build cycle routes out of the city, from city to suburb, and even more for cycle superhighways extending outside of the major city. On a local level, we know that Danes love their bikes. It's second nature to them, getting on their bikes and going wherever they want, whenever they want. The bike has grown with the Danish people and has become integrated in their lives, in their political and cultural initiatives in a way like no other. Danes associate bike riding with health, and cycling has actually become a symbol of personal energy. It's second nature to them. It's just as much normalized as washing your hands after you go to the bathroom or brushing your teeth in the morning. Honestly, I don't know how to ride bikes, and coming to a country that relies so heavily on bikes as a biking novice was like jumping into the deep end of a pool when you don't know how to swim, which is also admittedly something I'm very bad at, but it's the only way to grow. I never really appreciated bike riding before. It was only a secondary mode of transportation to me. I didn't understand what would be fun about being exposed to the elements and exerting yourself so heavily when you could take the bus or the metro. But Copenhagen has really taught me that bike riding isn't just about bike riding. It's freedom. It means freedom to the Danish people. And ordinary men and women gained the ability to move. It was a ticket around the city, but it was more importantly a ticket outside of the city, outside of the cramped spaces and into the fresh air. The bike has freed them from the inconvenience of cars and public transportation systems. It's part of their lives just as much as walking, eating, or breathing is. It's second nature. It is part of who they are. And there's really nothing like it in the world. Copenhagen has pushed, pulled, and challenged me in so many ways. It's inspired me to try new things and do things that scare me in very literal and metaphorical ways. And that includes getting on a bike. I mean, as a novice bike rider, getting on a bike surrounded by so many people who have been raised on bikes and who've potentially biked the streets of Copenhagen more than they've walked them. It was intimidating, but there's really no better way for you to truly experience Copenhagen and to see it and live it as a native does than to get on a bike.